Aloha, everyone. I wanted to welcome you to this basic training of trauma-informed care. I want to mahalo G and Keva for inviting me to this space and to be able to share the knowledge that I have with you and also learn from you all. So let's get started. My name is Ashley Pettit. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I want to start with a land acknowledgement, acknowledging that I am a very humble guest of this INA. I currently reside in Kailua, which is on the east side of Oahu, and I recognize that me being able to enjoy the gifts of Hawaii is due to the generations of Indigenous Native Hawaiians and their knowledge of the systems of Hawaii that made it as sustainable as it is today. I also recognize that this land was taken under duress and remains illegally occupied as a state of America. Um, as I said, my name is Ashley Pettit. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I have a background in trauma informed care as well as working with houseless and homeless folks, folks with serious and persistent mental illness. I was doing direct care for a number of years, and for the last several years have been really privileged to work more on systems work to address the systems that were not necessarily built to support the people that we work with and to figure out how to make them work better. So this is my learning intentions for today. To understand trauma-informed care, we're going to start by learning a little bit about what trauma is and how it impacts us. By impacts us, I mean can impact me, can impact you, doesn't necessarily impact everyone, but often it does in ways that we don't realize. We're going to go over what trauma-informed care is and how we use it. And my hope really is for us to be able to weave together things that you or your colleagues may already know just innately from living here in Hawaii and your own lived experiences with what I'm going to share today. And so that is my hope. This is probably the most important slide of the day. I always start with this disclaimer that we are going to be talking about trauma, and sometimes, oftentimes, that can evoke some strong reactions that we may not necessarily expect. I also want to acknowledge that the people of Maui have experienced a tremendous amount of trauma over the past um, a little less than 2 years. And so just to be mindful as we're going through this presentation, you know yourself best. And so I invite you at any point in time to take a break, whether that is completely shutting down the presentation and coming back to it later, whether that's turning off sound or turning off the slides. I really, really, really ask that you be honest with yourself. And if a part of you tells you that if this is too much or that it's hard to listen to this, that you put it aside and do what you need to do to take care of yourself. So that is my one request of you today going through this presentation. I also want to start with just a couple friendly reminders that as you're sharing this space with me today, to try to listen actively to the best of your ability. If you do choose to contribute, to do so with positive intention, being respectful of others. We all come with our own lived experiences, and we all see the world differently, which is a wonderful thing. And to be respectful of when others do choose to share. Again, just highlighting, if you do need to take a break at any time, you are welcome to do so. And these slides and this presentation will always be here for you to return to at a later date. So first thing, trauma. What is trauma? So this is SAMHSA's definition of trauma. It says trauma results from an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. I have been in the social work field a long time. I do not have this definition memorized by any means, and it's kind of a wordful. So I want to break it down a little bit to help us kind of more understand, well, what is trauma? Because it is a word that's being thrown around quite a bit now. And definitions matter. They do. So these are the three elements that were really described in that first definition of trauma. So these are called the three E's of trauma. They're the three components that make up what a trauma is. So the first one is an event. So when I think of an event, that can be an event that occurred. So someone was physically harmed or emotionally harmed. It can also be the threat of an event. So maybe there was no hand-on touch or actual physical damage that occurred, but there was a threat. The person felt like there was a chance that they were going to be threatened or harmed in some way. This event, it can be a singular event, so it can be something that occurred once. It can also be a repeated event. I think about this especially with folks that experience abuse. I think about this in terms of the wildfires in Maui and what we're seeing now as the recurrence of fires that are happening. And so all of those things matter. The second one is experience. We all experience life differently. We know that. For trauma specifically, what matters is how an individual or family or community experiences the event that occurred. We think about when we think about how someone experiences something, we think about maybe experiences that they've had in the past that may impact the way that they experience something. I like to use the example of like a car crash. So let's say that we have two individuals that are in a car, they're driving somewhere, the car crashes for whatever reason. Two people experience the same event, but they may have a different internal experience of what that event felt like. So when we look at effects, we're looking at what is the visible or invisible effect of that experience. So two people, same car crash, they both experienced it differently. One person, you may see the effects is they step out of the car, they're visibly shaking, they're crying, visible distress. The second person also was in the same event, but what they're showing is they're calm, they're collective. For whatever reason, the effects that they experience is different. Now, effects can also occur immediately after an event. They can also occur sometime down the road. So that person that stepped out of the car and was calm and collective, they may wake up the next day, the next week, the next month, and maybe have nightmares or have some other effects of the trauma that weren't initially present right after the event. And for that, we call that a delayed onset. These are a couple examples of trauma. I probably don't need to put these up here because a lot of people are intimately familiar with many different examples. But this just kind of shows the varying degree of different types of events that occur and that can lead to trauma. So different types of abuse and neglect, violence and terrorism, natural disasters. I also think about things like poverty and racism, discrimination and historical trauma. While those, we don't always necessarily think of those as examples of trauma, they most certainly are. And so I do like to help highlight those here. The last one is so the last one says disconnect from culture, language, and identity. I personally think about this one a lot in Hawaii, especially as we're seeing a higher population of our indigenous Native Hawaiians being forced to move to the continent or elsewhere due to the high cost of living and difficulty being able to remain on the Aina that is theirs, and the culture that the not the culture, the trauma that they experience being away from the Aina that is part of them, um, and the language and the culture that you identify with. And so those are very much examples of trauma. This is one of my favorite authors. I've probably read all of his books more times than I can count. His name is Gabor Mate. This is one of my favorite quotes that he says about trauma. He says that trauma is not what happens to you. Trauma is what happens inside of you as a result of what happens to you. So this just is a clear, for me, a clear definition of really the delineation between an event, an experience, and the effect of what makes up trauma. So this is I came across this meme. I don't know, like graphic, I guess you'll call it. Very shortly after the wildfires occurred. I think I found it on social media or something, but I love it and I use it all the time now because I think it is a visually very accurate description of how trauma impacts us. So this yellow window is called your window of tolerance. So your window of tolerance is what you feel like you can deal with on a day-to-day basis. And what I mean deal with is like your kids are crying, or someone, you're driving and someone honks at you or pulls out of you, or you get a nasty email. So things that you experience and can either tolerate or not. When you're doing well, your window of tolerance might be quite wide. You can tolerate a lot of things. What trauma does is that it affects that window of tolerance. It actually shrinks it. So it can do that in two ways. The first way is it can shrink it and it can lead to hyperarousal. When I think of hyperarousal, I think of, okay, you're driving down the road, someone pulls out in front of you. Normally, maybe that would just be something that you shrug off your shoulder. But when you've experienced trauma and the stress that accompanies that, and your window of tolerance has shrunk, you might have a hyperarousal symptom of starting yelling uncontrollably. Your blood pressure rises. You really feel like this volcano is looking like it's going to explode. Alternatively, there's some folks that have more of a hypoarousal state. And I'm one of those people. So same situation, you may be driving down the road, someone pulls out in front of you, you go completely numb, you zone out, maybe you not even remember how you got the rest of the way home. Your body just kind of shuts down and you have very minimal response. So these are two types of ways that trauma can impact us. Some people experience both. Some people experience one or the other. But what's important is that, people frequently ask me, why am I having such a huge response or no response at all to something that normally doesn't impact me? And the way that I explain it is that your window is shrinking a little bit, but there are ways to get your window to open back up, and we are going to talk about that in a little bit. So what are the different ways that this can show up? And when I say show up, I mean like we know that trauma has impacted an individual, a community, or an agency. I'm not going to go into each one of these, but it's just basically to show you that trauma can impact us on a number of different levels. So individually, that could look like poor health outcomes. It could look like relationship challenge or heightened emotions. In our communities, it could look like increase in community violence. It could look like intergenerational poverty or inequity in housing and education. And in our agencies, and when I talk about agencies, I'm thinking specifically of like the places that we work. It could look like avoiding a task or conflict between employees. It could look someone missing work a lot for a reason that we're not quite sure of. Um, when I do work with organizations, especially organizations that are either have a large number of employees or work with folks that have experienced trauma, I do ask their managers or their colleagues to look out for these things because someone may not overtly say, I'm experiencing trauma or I'm being impacted by trauma and it's affecting the way that I function. But there are things that you can look for, and these are some of them, just to keep yourself aware, to be looking out for each other. These are a couple other ways that trauma can impact our health. My background, I worked at Adventist Health Castle for many years and in other healthcare settings before that. And so I am always attuned and integrating the way that our physical body is affected by things that we experience and kind of how that shows up in our health. So trauma can and does not necessarily, but can increase the likelihood of individuals smoking, acquiring sexually transmitted infections, engaging in alcohol or substance use, and experiencing symptoms of depression and COPD. So this is the next, I think there's 3 slides. The next 3 slides are what we are actually seeing in Maui as a result of the wildfires. And so this is the Maui wildfire exposure study. Some of the findings that they have had, these charts were specifically taken from the report that they released earlier this year, and the reference from them as at the bottom of the page. There's a couple of things that I want to highlight here. So one of them is they asked individuals who had been impacted by the fires, did you have any difficulties accessing your medical care or your medication? There are, fortunately, 60% who said they didn't have any difficulty, but the ones that really draw my eye are the 28% that said they did have a difficulty accessing their Medicare medications or medical care since the wildfires. And we want to be mindful of that, especially as we're working with Kūpuna or folks that might have chronic health conditions. The next bar chart also shows changes in health over the past year. This one is exceptionally alarming for me because it says 46% reported that their health is worse now than it was a year ago. That could be as a result because folks weren't able to access medical care or medication. It could also be due to just how trauma impacts our system. And so those are just things to keep in mind. Because our Kūpuna does an incredible job specifically working to provide nourishment through food, I wanted to highlight this. So it says that 47% of households that were impacted by the fires reported experiencing low food security, and this is higher than previous rates observed locally and nationally. I also want to highlight that the food insecurity that is highest, as reported by this study, is in Filipinos and Latino population, as well as Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders. So the services that you all are providing are vital, just critically essential to try to bring those numbers down. This is, I'm pretty sure, the last slide of the Maui West study, but it says, how often do you feel supported by friends or family in your recovery effort? Again, great to see that 28% are reporting always, and another 28 are saying that most of the time they do feel supported. Um, the ones that are concerning for me are the ones, the 21%, and especially the 5% of folks that say they really don't feel like they have the support they need. And so as we are engaging with folks in our community, especially Kūpuna that might be more isolated, just kind of keeping in mind that different people are able to access the support of family and friends at different ratios. And so maybe that's something we want to be asking about or be curious about, is if someone does feel supported by the friends or family. I also, in this slide in particular, I think about all the um, uh, uh, neighborhoods of people that the support was from your neighbors, from the people that you grew up with that are uh, right across the street from you. And when we are displacing people all over the island, the impacts of that, that it's not as easy to access the support of the friends and family that we were once able to just literally walk next door to access. Now we have to drive across the island or maybe even make a long distance phone call to someone on the continent or another island. And so those things really impact us. There's one more part of or type of trauma that I want to highlight. I highlight this specifically for folks that are working with individuals who have experienced trauma, regardless of whether you have or have not experienced trauma yourself. So this is called a secondary trauma response. And so this is the impact of indirect exposure to traumatic images or stories. So this would be listening to someone talk about the trauma they've experienced, or seeing on news repeatedly the images of people experiencing some type of trauma. You may not have been there in that moment. You may not have direct family members that were in that moment, but you do experience symptoms just like someone who was, because you are being exposed to it on a secondary nature. I do encourage folks that are working with populations of people that have experienced trauma, before you go in to work with them and on an ongoing basis, to really look if you're at risk. Are there things in your past traumatic experiences or other experiences that may put you at risk for having a secondary trauma uh, uh, response, and to constantly be checking in with yourself, with your now, and seeing, am I okay with working with this population? Are there a subset of this population or an area that is especially challenging for me to work with? And then to be open and engaging with whoever you trust in your organization about your limitations. And those are not faults at all. That is being your own best advocate and taking care of your needs. Okay, that was a lot. Before I transition to trauma-informed care, I am first going to take a drink of water, but I am also going to encourage everybody to take 3 deep breaths so that we can move out of that space of learning about trauma and move into the space of learning about trauma-informed care. And so I am going to lead us in 3 deep breaths. I invite you to close your eyes if you'd like to, or you can keep them open. But taking a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth, and 2 more deep breaths on your own time. All right. So trauma-informed care. I will be honest, I took this image and this quote directly from the Our Kūpuna website because I feel like it perfectly captures in a very simple way what trauma-informed care is. It says, in a world where you can be anything, be kind. Good job, whoever put that up there. One of the opportunities that I have been immensely privileged and grateful to have had over the past couple years is to be one of the co-facilitators of Hawaii's Trauma-Informed Care Task Force. And the undertaking of this task force is to take what we know about trauma-informed care and to make it applicable and implementable in, I'm not sure if that's a word, but uh, in Hawaii, and to make it so that all state departments and people serving agencies are able to implement trauma-informed practices in their care of the people of Hawaii, and also with our colleagues and with each other. So this is the task force specific definition of trauma-informed and responsive practices specific to Hawaii. It says, these are defined as an approach to understanding, recognizing, respecting, and responding, to the pervasive and widespread impacts of trauma on our ability to connect with ourselves and others, our place and the elements around us, and our ways of being. Again, kind of a mouthful, but it really highlights a number of different things that I want to unpack in terms of really what trauma-informed care is. Trauma-informed care is a framework. It gives us an understanding that, one, trauma exists, so it occurs in the world that we live in, and that it is pervasive. It occurs a lot. Two, helps us understand that trauma can impact individual and community wellness. This includes traumas that are happening currently, like wars or fires or abuse. It also includes traumas that occurred historically. It gives us the framework for recognizing how to see and recognize signs that someone has experienced trauma. And okay, there's not a most important part, but it gives us a framework for how to avoid re-traumatizing others in our interactions with each other. Uh, I would love to say that I came up with this graphic and this idea of kind of transitioning the question, but I didn't, but I do love it, and so I always include it. Trauma-informed care really gives us an opportunity to change the question from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. I think of this, like one example is if anyone works with children and you see a child exhibiting what some might call extreme behaviors. So there's kicking and screaming or biting or, behaviors that might cause alarm. Some folks may say, "What's wrong with you?" or respond in that way. Trauma-informed care invites us and kind of gives us some tools for, instead of asking what's wrong with you, asking that child or creating a curiosity about what could have possibly happened to that child or that individual to cause them to exhibit the effects or behaviors that we're seeing in that moment, so that we can more compassionately understand and respond in a way that does not trigger or re-traumatize that person. So there are 6 principles of trauma-informed care. We're going to go through each of these. I'm going to provide a couple examples, and hopefully these will help us build the framework for what trauma-informed care means, especially in Hawaii. So the first principle is safety. I want to highlight that on the bottom right side of the screen for each of these 6 principles, I do have a question that I've created that is kind of a question that I encourage folks to keep in their pocket as to how you can really implement or put into practice each of these principles. So I also always get a chuckle when I see out of this because I'm not really sure why I chose the safety pin. I mean, I get it that it's a safety pin and it has safety in it, but it was an interesting choice of a graphic for me. So anyways, um, so safety. Safety, I want to highlight, is both physical safety as well as psychological safety. When I think about safety, I think about the spaces and the interactions that we are creating with the individuals that we're serving or interacting with on a daily basis. We're asking, how do we offer opportunities for more feelings of safety? Physical safety could be like the actual area. I think about like parking lots that are lit, or uh, tools that are in place to make someone feel more safe in the physical space that they're in. But I also think about psychological safety, and that is um, creating experiences where there is predictability, um, there is familiarity, um, and there's reliability. Those are all components that allow someone to feel safe and comfortable in their experience. Um, I When I am often struggling, the things that I want most are my mom's cooking and fuzzy blankets. Those are two things that I know allow me and my body to feel safe. And so, as we're working with people that have experienced trauma, we really want to be creating spaces for them to come into, that we can invite them into, and interactions that we can invite them into that allow for them to feel that same sense of safety and security that our own our own safety tools make us feel. The next one is historical, cultural, and gender issues. So we want to be honoring the cultures and identities of both ourselves and the people that we serve. Uh, uh, Nowhere is this more applicable probably than in Hawaii. We have such a melting pot of cultures and identities, and we are on Aina that is very much, rooted in the Indigenous Native Hawaiian people's identity, and from a trauma-informed care approach, we want to be abundantly understanding and responsive to the specific racial, cultural, and gender needs of the individuals that we're serving. We want to be making sure that we are offering services to people that is culturally appropriate. It is in the language that they speak. It is rooted in Indigenous knowledge or understanding. It is recognizing the oppressive forces that may have impacted that person or their family in current situations as well as past situations. And so all of those things we want to take into account. Again, as we're engaging with folks, to avoid as much as we can any re-traumatization in our interactions with an individual. The next principle is trustworthiness and transparency. So we are looking at how can we build trust with each other and the people that we serve. Trust builds safety, and it can take a long time to build trust with an individual, with families, with communities. Trust is not something that occurs overnight. It's something that you have to work at, you have to work hard at. But the way that we can work towards these trusting relationships is to be transparent about our decisions, about our expectations, about things that are coming down the pike, services that we're offering. I think sometimes specifically about in the systems that we are operating in right now. Things are changing every day. New information is coming out. New forms are being published. And that can be very hard for folks to navigate. It's very hard for me to navigate. And so if we're trying to promote transparency when we're giving information or sharing information out to the individuals that we serve, perhaps we're prefacing it with, this is the most up-to-date information that we have now, but I want to let you know that this information may change tomorrow. And when it does, we're going to let you know, so that you're creating the expectation that this information is relevant to today, but there is an awareness that it might be changing. The next principle is collaboration and mutuality. So we're looking at how can we paddle together with our clients to ensure that their voices, all voices, are heard. We're looking at how can we create mutual healing spaces through shared decision making. We're focusing on how we can draw on someone's past experiences for maybe things that have helped them in the past. We're giving folks options in terms of how they want to engage in their own care, and we're removing power dynamics that may exist between us and them, so that we are moving together, kind of on the same level, so that we can both be healing mutually and allowing more forward progress to happen. The next one is empowerment, voice, and choice. We are looking at how we can create opportunities to build resiliency in ourself and in our client. I love this image. So when people experience trauma, often one of the things that it does is that it feels like, or it does take away the personal power that a person has. And so with trauma-informed care approaches, we are really trying to seek opportunities to hand that power back to that person. And so we do that by encouraging the people that we are working with, the people that we serve, to advocate for themselves, maybe modeling what that looks like in terms of self-advocacy. We're encouraging them to make choices and be verbal about those choices. And then we're respecting and honoring those choices, especially when they're maybe not the choices that we would make for ourselves, acknowledging that this is their life, and they do have the power to make decisions that could be different from what we would choose for ourselves. And we're also we're really focusing on individual and community and family strengths. It can be very easy to forget the internal and external strengths that we have, and we have many. And so as much as we can, really seeking to know and understand the strengths of the person that we served, especially when I think about our Kūpuna. If you have made it to Kūpuna status, then you are strong because you have encountered a whole lifetime of experiences and you are still going. And so maybe it's figuring out what is it that, what are the internal or external strengths that allowed you to do that? And how can we continue to use those in this experience? Are they still applicable? How can we access them? This principle is peer support. I believe this is the last one, but it's certainly not the least. So we are looking for how we can create opportunities for ourselves and our clients to connect with peers around shared experiences. Folks that have experienced trauma speak a language that those who have not experienced trauma do not speak. And that is not to fault people that are in the helping and healing professions that have not experienced trauma, but there is a connectivity for many people that have experienced trauma, that they are able to engage or connect with each other and share in a way that someone who has not experienced trauma cannot. And so this is why using peer support, using peer navigators is essential for supporting communities that have experienced trauma, because we really want to be looking for how do we create experiences where people that speak that same language are able to engage and support and share story and mutually help each other in a way that feels safe and that builds trust. And that's critically essential in trauma-informed care. So now that you've listened to all that, this is kind of the Cliff Notes version of a quick and easy way that maybe you can screenshot or take a picture of ways to remember easily what trauma-informed care is in terms of kind of what we're trying to achieve. So trauma-informed care, it realizes that trauma exists, that it's pervasive, and that it can impact individuals, families, and communities. It recognizes by allowing us to recognize the sign and symptoms of trauma as we see them show up in individuals, families, communities, and agencies. It gives us a framework for how to respond using trauma-informed approaches, and it resists re-traumatizing folks that may have already experienced trauma, where if we were to re-traumatize, it would further worsen their symptoms. I personally like to think of trauma-informed care as universal precautions. Again, coming from a medical background, when you go to the emergency room, say, what is one of the first things that nurses do? They put on gloves. They don't ask you if you have an illness that can be spread from, like a bloodborne illness that can be spread. They don't ask you if you have some kind of skin condition that is contagious. They just put on gloves. They assume and they take necessary precautions that everybody has some kind of illness that they may contract. And so they put on gloves as a universal precaution to ensure that they don't contract a condition from the person that they're serving, but also if they unknowingly have something themselves, that they are not passing them on. Trauma-informed care, in my eyes, is very similar. We are taking universal precautions. When we leave the house or when we get out of bed in the morning, we're putting on our trauma-informed gloves and trauma-informed care gloves, assuming as we go out into the world that any number of people that we encounter, clients, family, individual, the person at the grocery store, the person getting us breakfast, that any of those people could have experienced trauma or is experiencing a trauma of some sort. And so we are responding with compassion and ways that will ensure that we are not re-traumatizing that individual. I put this up here. This is Auntie Palahi Paki's very, I don't even know the word for it, but her definition of aloha and how it really does resonate with trauma-informed care. I put this up here because I want to remind the folks that I am doing trainings with that trauma-informed care is not that different from aloha. And we know this intimately in Hawaii, especially folks that are indigenous to this island, to this Aina. And so I put this up here because sometimes it can be intimidating to know or learn a new framework. And I want to remind everyone in this training that there are likely ways that you are already operating or engaging that really align with trauma-informed care. This is another example of that. So this is a framework that was created by Kūpuna Valley Comprehensive Family Health Services, which is a federally qualified health center in Kalihi Valley in Oahu. So this is called the Pilinaha, or the Four Frameworks framework, Four Connections framework. There is an image on the right side that beautifully displays like a visual representation of this. But basically what this framework does is it gives a fuller alternative than viewing health as a list of symptoms in an individual. It allows Kūpuna Kalihi Valley to approach health as wholeness and inclusivity in community. And it asks, or encourages us to ask others, when is the last time you felt healthiest or strongest? There is an integration, as you can see in this visual representation, of how community, place, yourself, and the past, present, and future of those all interconnect to support well-being. And in trauma-informed care, that is really what we are trying to do, is to support and improve upon the well-being of the individuals that we serve, those in our communities and families, as well as in ourselves. So what does this look like? I have given a few examples already, but I do want to give a couple more, just so that people have kind of more visuals. I'm a very visual person, of what it actually looks like to operate in a place of using trauma-informed care approaches. I use this phrase a lot for folks that are engaging with houseless folks, or maybe folks that have recently experienced some sort of trauma. Folks commonly ask me, what do I do first? Like, how do I get them a solution? From a trauma-informed care approach, I would encourage offering a seat and a soda over a solution first. And when I say a seat and a soda, I mean offering a comfortable space, a space that allows for a person to feel safe. And then maybe attuning to a basic need first before we start searching for solutions for problems that are very, very broad. So maybe that's a sandwich, maybe that's a soda, maybe that's a blanket, things that just allow our body to relax. Another example is to be always seeking to create connection with someone as opposed to judgment. Everybody interacts in the world on different ways, and often we see people and we may not understand the way that they are behaving, the way that they are communicating. But if we can come from a place of seeking to find a connection with that individual, as opposed to placing judgment on them, that is trauma-informed care. One perfect example of this in Hawaii is that every new person that you meet asks where you went to high school. You are seeking to find what is the connection between me and that person to start to build that relationship, or to find the commonality. So that's kind of something that's already embedded here. We want to be observing first as we're entering the spaces that we're interacting with people, before we walk in or run in, which is often something a lot of us, myself included, love to do. We want to stop, maybe take a breath. We want to observe the surroundings of what's happening in the space, in the room, with the person. We want to be asking permission to approach that person or that community of that family, and asking for their permission to engage with them, knowing that the answer may be no, and that's okay. At least we allowed ourselves to ask, as opposed to assuming that it's okay for us to come into that space. We want to be clear about who we are and what our intentions are. This is a perfect example of transparency. Right after the wildfires, again, I live on Oahu. I was not directly impacted by the Maui wildfires, but I was invited by G and Imua Family Services to come to Maui to support the staff there, to provide trainings like this, and just to provide a space and tools for folks to be able to support each other and the individuals that they served. The sentence that I said the most every time that I came was, "My name is Ashley. I live on Oahu. I was invited here by G. I'm here to offer any type of support I can." I was clear about my intentions so that people knew why I was there, who I was, who invited me. And so that was transparent and abundantly clear upfront. And then people could choose how they wanted to operate or interact with me from there. We also want to be seeking to listen, to understand. We want to be offering choices to the individuals that we serve. And we want to be understanding that the behaviors that we see, even if we may not totally understand them, even if we personally feel like they're not healthy coping behaviors, they are behaviors that are adaptive for that person or that family or that community to be able to survive whatever traumatic experience they have. So they are adaptive behaviors that person or community has formed. Because I know a lot of you work with Kūpuna, I wanted to especially highlight some of the unique things about working with Kūpuna that may have experienced trauma. You may see that there is a hesitancy, or some may say a resistance to share information, specifically to share information about what they have experienced. That is not uncommon. We also want to be mindful that Kūpuna have, as I said before, experienced a lifetime of experiences. And so new traumas that have been experienced may actually be resurfacing old traumas that they either have or they either have memories of, or they've forgotten those memories of. And so there can be like a compounding effect. You may see an elevated expression of guilt or shame from Kūpuna, and also a grief or an anger about a sense of loss of independence. If Kūpuna had to move back in with family, or if they are no longer able to do the things that they were once able to do, that can be very challenging for Kūpuna that have possibly tried to seek help or support in the past, and maybe those experiences were not positive. If we are seeing some hesitancy for folks to engage or accept help, it may be due to broken trust from a previous encounter where they did try to access help. I also want to remind us that as folks age, we all have coping skills that we turn to, whether that is going for walks when we're angry, or drawing, or going for a swim, calling a friend. For folks that use specifically active coping mechanisms, so running, biking, swimming, surfing, whatever it is, Kūpuna may not be able physically to engage in those activities anymore. And if those are activities that Kūpuna used historically as their coping mechanisms, there may be a grief over not being able to access those coping mechanisms, and an uncertainty as to how to cope now. And so that may be an opportunity for us to collaboratively work with an individual or their family as to how to create new coping mechanisms. Regardless of whether or not I am providing training to an agency that supports keiki, I almost always get questions about, well, what about the keiki? So I include this slide always. The most important thing that I want to stress about this slide is that keiki are resilient. Many times when kids have experienced a loss or a trauma, you will see them grieve or struggle immensely. And then 5 minutes later, they'll go play. That is a healthy way of coping. It's something that I wish adults could still remember how to do. Um, but it is a way that kids are resilient, is that they don't stay immersed. Not all kids, but a lot of kids, they don't naturally stay immersed in that heavy experience. Their natural inclination is to then go play or run around and move out of that space, so that they are kind of able to integrate that experience. Working with keiki or supporting keiki, we want to be more aware of children who are at risk, whether that is due to past experience that they've had. Maybe it is due to a socioeconomic status or a living situation. When we are working with them, we want to be sitting at eye level. So again, trying to remove the power dynamic between them. We want to be providing things that feel familiar, such as routines. Routines are very healthy for children, and the more that we can support keiki in returning to routines that feel familiar, even when that is incredibly difficult to do, that does help children regulate their internal symptoms, their internal systems. Often, children, especially younger children, they may not be able to tell us about their emotions or their moods. I know we have these mood charts with the faces, but in my experience, often children are able to tell us about their body sensations. So whether that is their stomach hurting or their uh, a tightness in their chest or some kind of pain in their head. And so we can be asking about those things as a way of gauging how a child is doing. And when we're looking at when we're kind of looking to see how a child is doing, we want to be looking specifically at behaviors that tell us that a child might be struggling. So any behavior that may seem out of the norm or uh, like acting out of some sort, or change from what type of behavior you would be normal of them before they experience a trauma, that that change in behavior can and often is a way of a child showing us that they are struggling. And so we can be curious about that. We don't want to judge it, but we can be curious, again, asking, I wonder what happened. I wonder what they're experiencing, and finding ways to engage on that. We want to be responding as much as we can with love and support, uh, uh, not punishment and blame. And we want to, I talked a lot with families after the wildfires about this, is being mindful about the media exposure that children have, especially when the media is recurrently showing images or talking about things that could potentially be re-traumatizing. Even when children, you are not the ones looking like on a screen, or they're not watching TV, but they may be somewhere else in the space within earshot, they are often listening. And so it's just being mindful as we are engaging in our own media intake. Are we in a space where there also may be children who have been impacted by some type of trauma, who may be intaking that information, that media exposure as well? The last thing I want to teach on here is a cookie breath tool. I didn't create this. Someone taught it to me many, many years ago, but I use it a lot, not just for working with kids, but also for myself. So I am going to demonstrate this tool for you. It does look a little silly. I am going to encourage you to practice it yourself because it will probably make you laugh and also feel silly. So the idea is that you want to invite the children that you're working with to think about, maybe share with you, what is their favorite type of cookie that their tutu, nana, grandma, grandpa, mom, auntie, whoever it is makes. If they don't like cookies, pick another delectable bakery treat that has a really good aroma that can be cooked in an oven. So for me, hands down, chocolate chip cookies. So we are going to ask them to cultivate that image in their mind. Chocolate chip cookies or whatever it is cooking in the oven. Tutu pulls the cookies out of the oven. Here come the cookies. They're coming to your nose. You can smell them, the aroma of the cookies. You want to encourage them to breathe in through their nose so they can smell them. Those cookies smell good. And then, but the cookies are too hot. So Tutu tells them, okay, you need to breathe on the cookies to make them cooler so that we can eat them. So breathing them out, breathing in through your nose, breathing out through your mouth. Super simple tool, helps to regulate their breath and their emotions, and they don't even know that that's what's happening. So good starting place. We're getting very close to the end, and so I want to first express my gratitude to you all for sticking with me through this long. And I want to invite you to take the first steps to engaging in trauma-informed care. I don't know if there's a universal recommendation for first steps, but this is my personal recommendation. Is as you are starting to work with individuals who have experienced trauma, particularly if you have experienced trauma yourself, is to be curious about your own triggers or your own biases. So what I mean by that is have a conversation with yourself or have a conversation with your colleagues about what are the things for you that may be difficult in working with someone that's experienced trauma. That might be hearing a particular type of stories. That may be offering a particular type of intervention. That may be going to a particular part of the island. We may not know all our triggers, but the more that we get curious about what they might be, the less likely they are to take us off guard, and the more likely we are to be able to plan ahead and communicate with our team about these are the areas where I may or may not have a little bit more challenge. Maybe I can bring a buddy, maybe someone else can cover that, or maybe I can check in with someone afterwards just to make sure that I'm okay. I also really want to encourage you guys to be patient and kind to yourself. With trauma-informed care, we talk a lot about cultivating compassion for others, and sometimes it can be harder to cultivate compassion for ourselves, but it really is essential, especially right now. This is my second to last slide. It's kind of I call it my takeaway slide. This is everything that we've covered thus far, and I like to put it all in one slide so that if you want to take a screenshot or you want to take a photo, it's just a nice little handy thing to have if someone asks you what trauma-informed care is, or you're just trying to cultivate a memory of kind of all the things that we've covered. So basically, trauma-informed care is changing the question from what's wrong with you to what's happened to you, cultivating that curiosity as opposed to kind of a judgment. We are realizing that trauma is prevalent and that it affects us. We're recognizing the signs and symptoms that people may exhibit. We are responding with a trauma-informed approach so that we can resist any re-traumatization. And we're remembering that trauma is not what happens to you, but it's what happens inside of you as a result of what happened to you. At the bottom, I have the 6 principles that really guide this framework of trauma informed care. So that's cultural and historical and gender issues, safety, trust and transparency, collaboration and mutuality, peer support, empowerment, voice, and choice. I'm going to leave you with this quote. Uh, it says, "One does not need to be a therapist to be therapeutic." I think that this perfectly captures what trauma informed care means to me. Uh, every interaction that you have with another human being is an opportunity to promote healing. No one needs formal education in therapeutic interventions to have an interaction with a person be therapeutic. Uh, I want to mahalo all of you for spending time with me today. I want to especially mahalo you for the work that you're doing for your community. And I want to invite you to keep in touch and to reach out with any questions or concerns that you have. And I want to thank our Kūpuna and Maui United Way for the invitation to provide this training.